egg on your face sometimes then when it doesn't pan out and they like, all this work happens and they're like, cool, where's the revenue uplift? I'm like, we're not the only weather app out there, but we want our users to come, to ours. And we're all, huddling and sharing information with each other. I mean, not proprietary information. No one get upset about that. Rising tide will lift us all up, because I don't feel like each other are the enemies. I think there are a few really, really big publishers that are enemies, but they're definitely not in our boat.
Good morning and welcome to another episode of Web Without Walls. I'm Sarah Ruxin, SVP of Revenue and Operations here at Mile, and your host for today's session. I'm very lucky today to have Catherine Beattie with us, Director of Programmatic at WeatherBug. Catherine, thanks so much for joining. I'm going to start, I have planned for us today a very broad and wide-ranging conversation about the contours of the market, what you think is exciting and noteworthy, and no doubt you'll be sharing some very cool stuff from your unique perspective with us. But before we jump in, I'm going to share a little bit about myself, about Mile, and about Catherine. I started in the early days of AdTech, building websites for publishers like the New York Times and General Mills. I then went on to help publishers navigate early monetization strategies like conversational marketing when I was at Federated Media. I then moved on to help publishers adopt new technologies like header bidding at OpenX. And most recently, I've been focused on helping publishers leverage AI and machine learning to optimize their ad stack. A little bit about Mile. We're a publisher-first platform, a Google-certified publishing partner, and an end-to-end ad platform that really helps empower publishers to build and manage and scale their ad stack. A little bit about Catherine. Catherine's been in ad tech for about 15 years, and we're just so lucky to have you talking to us. Having you on the team is like a dream, says Ad Monsters. Congratulations. I know you were recently included in their 2024 Dream Team. Before joining the team, you've spent years with premium brands like Tribune Publishing and Merriam-Webster before moving over to WeatherBug. And I know you firsthand, and I know that you share my feeling that this industry is very collaborative and supportive, and if we take time to connect with others, we really get a lot out of it. So thank you again for connecting with us today. Can't wait to talk more.
Let's dive into it. Do you mind sharing a little bit? How did you start in ad tech? How did you get here in the first place?
Sure. So out of college, I actually went into consulting, and I did consulting for like 6 years. And I started to focus on project management consulting, and that was great. It's actually similar a little bit to what I like about digital too, in this digital industry, in that it was always different, a different client. It kept you on your toes, a lot of variety. But it was also a lot of travel, and I just kind of got tired of that. So after like 6 years, I said, okay, let me find a job in Chicago where I pay rent and I can feel like I actually live here. And so as it turned out, Tribune Publishing needed to hire someone with project management experience to, the first project being replace their order management system, for their digital ad operations team. So that's essentially how I kind of stumbled into kind of this whole world. And when that project kind of finished, instead of just having me focus on the next project, the head of ad operations over at Tribune, you know her, Barb Healy, she was like, and you're going to be on my team now. So she kind of like scooped me into her ad operations world, and I'm very grateful that it worked out that way. And then, I spent almost 10 years there then at Tribune, and kind of heading up their ad operations team for supporting all the direct sold campaigns and all the direct sellers across the country at Tribune. And then and there was always some project to manage. I never have really gotten away from the project management element of it. I think there is a lot of that in the ad ops and in programmatic and in digital. There's always something. Maybe it's a workflow management tool. Maybe it's a billing system, ad server update. Maybe it's a project to outsource screenshots or things like that, where you're trying to be efficient and still really productive with your team, and do less with more, or do more with less. Oh my
Right.
goodness, do more with less. So it's always felt like to me, since being in this world, that AdOps is almost like a hub for process improvement. I
Yeah.
think part of that is that we see a lot of the way that things will connect from, kind of an end-to-end process flow. Yeah, yes, the RFP came in. Yes, we had to do some data entry. There was creative that needed to be captured. We're involved in so much of that process that we have a unique opportunity to figure out how to make it even better. So, yeah, so project management kind of set me on that path, and I'm still doing it, whether it's putting in a CMP now or an ad quality tool, and, adding identity partners. This world does not stay stagnant. There are those tools, like you mentioned, those pitches we'll get, but
Right.
it's really the partnerships that we make, and they involve an integration, they involve an implementation, a project needs to happen. So yeah, it kind of, my consulting start kind of put me on the path to be really comfortable with managing projects, and digital has given me an opportunity to do that in a lot of different ways as well.
That's so cool. Yeah, I mean, I think the one, it's a cliche, right? But the one constant is change, right? And this industry in particular, you're always confronted with a change that is going to affect, your status quo.
Also, that is kind of how my, like, kind of employment has evolved too, like these opportunities to try something new or different. So at Tribune, like I said, I supported all the direct sales side of the house. Encyclopedia Britannica and Merriam-Webster reached out and were like, do you want to learn programmatic? I
Yeah.
was like, ooh, I would
Right.
like to learn programmatic. So then I went over there for 6 years and did programmatic. And then WeatherBug reached out a little over a year ago.
I think what's so interesting is, you really, Tribune was much more on the direct side, right? And the evolution, to the next jump was about programmatic. And then the next jump from there is really about in-app. I would love to know, we if we can look a little bit under the hood and learn a little more about the difference between jumping from a very display focused business to an in-app business. I imagine the challenges you had in display are kind of wildly different from the in-app challenges that you had.
Yeah, and the difference from like the web to the in-app side, I think the biggest element that's unique in the in-app world is, how much is it works because of different SDKs, the software
Mhm.
development kits that are implemented in the app. So really, I had to shift mindsets. When on the website, a demand partner wanted to test on our inventory,
Mhm.
and I'm using, the Google ad server. And it's like, okay, yeah, it's as easy as, well, okay, I'll set up a line item and test you for 2 weeks. And if you don't work, you don't work. So sorry, on to the
Yeah.
next.
Yeah.
With app, it's about, well, how can a demand partner connect with us then? I have
Right.
certain SDKs implemented in my app. Are they compatible? Really, when they come to me, their options are going to be connecting through the Amazon TAM SDK, the
Mhm.
Nimbus SDK, or the Prebid server integration. And so, they have to be already compatible with one of those things. Now, because I'm not going to put 35 different ad SDKs in my app.
Right.
Everyone wants their own special precious little ad SDK in there. No, that's not how this is going to work.
Yeah.
And so that was something where, that was kind of a shift for me. It's not super, so as a result, it's not quite as straightforward maybe to just test a
Sure.
potential partners, claims of, all the money that will fall from the sky when I plug them in, um, which is fine, and that's good. I've made investments in these SDKs in my app, and they are very wide reaching, right? Like I do have 35 different partners connected, but only these three SDKs when it comes to advertising.
Mhm.
So that's certainly a difference with web.
Yeah.
And then the other thing to consider is when it comes to the app world, we all know, right? We have apps on our phone. We either have iOS auto updating to the latest version, or maybe on Android, we choose what cadence we want to update, to the latest version of an app. So when I put something new out there, I've got a new release of my app, I've got the latest version, I can be super excited about it. There's a long tail where some users are not going to update to that latest version for a while. Some people, may not want to update at all. So it's just
Right.
one of those things where I'm kind of dependent on, okay, there's a ramp up, a rolling adoption of my new changes. So I'll see my results in a little bit of a longer term fashion. Whereas on the web, that was kind of easy to test right away. I'm going to put some JavaScript on the page. It's going to work or it's not. And then if it doesn't, I'm just going to take it right off. And everything is current. Everything is immediately the latest and greatest. And it's part of why we also have to be very careful about what, if we do put a new SDK in the app, then that's going to, that's going to stick. There are going to be older versions of our app that will have that access. And, if I decide I'm pulling that SDK out of the latest version, well, that's great for the latest version,
Right.
but some of that like ongoing updating and versioning, it's more of a consideration in app than it ever was in a web environment. So the thing that we're super careful about, certainly at WeatherBug, is that we are ultimately responsible for everything that's happening in our app. If I put an SDK of potential partner X in there, that's great. Of course, I have a legal contract with them. Of course, there are terms and conditions, but that's my app. Like I'm responsible for whatever's going to happen in there. So we take it, very thoughtfully to determine what's going to get a chance to go in.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's interesting because I think from the from the user side and even from the within the community, people don't think as much about that, right? Because it is so easy to test something on web, right? You can put up a test page, a single page that's not going to impact the users at all, and they will have no idea. Where it's just not the same, right? You can't just put up a test app every time you want to test a new technology or partner. I don't know if you've had any experiences either on web or not necessarily at WeatherBug that went wrong. Integrations that you had to claw. You had a big fire drill internally, and you had to claw back. And if so, how did those things kind of come about? Was it something you were able to relatively easily control and roll back? Um,
Yeah, I think we've all, as publishers, at some point or another, been a little burned maybe by, the grand claims or promises that don't
yeah.
end up really proving out once you go through all the internal work, with finance, with legal, you onboard, you use your engineering resources,
Hmm.
you have people testing and doing QA, and you put it out there in the world, whether it's on the web or in app, and then
Right.
like it's a disappointment,
Yeah.
and it's it's a bummer because it happens. It's bound to happen. It's also not even due to any kind of maliciousness on the
Right.
vendor's part, right, or
Sure.
the
Yeah.
partner's part, because everyone's inventory, everyone's setup, everyone's technology is a little different, and
For
so
sure. Yeah.
you can do your homework, right? I can talk
Yeah.
to publisher references who use that partner and love them, and it works really well for them.
Yeah.
When I launch them on my inventory, it just might not. And
Yeah.
so I have been
Yeah.
burned in the past. I think in the publisher world, we're always tight on resources.
Yeah.
We're always trying to like scramble for attention a little bit. Like, hey, can I get you to just look at this script, or can I get you to see what it would take to put this in the SDK?
Yeah.
And it's a little bit of egg on your face sometimes. Then when it doesn't pan out, and they like all this work happens, and they're like, cool, where's the revenue uplift?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think, it's part of why publishers are so careful when we're vetting new partners or potential partners. It's honestly part of why, too, I think a lot of publishers are used to making a judgment on that cold call email that's coming through our inboxes because we're getting um, a lot of them.
Sure.
A lot
There's
of
a lot of noise. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of noise. And, we can really only spend our resources on the things that we truly believe
Yeah.
will bring us kind of that bang for our buck. And, it's just part of it, though.
Yeah.
Sometimes you won't know that
Yeah.
it's going to work or not work until you try it.
Yeah. Well, and I think on I've been at several different platforms, and you're exactly right. Every publisher, right? There is not one setup that works for every publisher. There's always going to be a nuance. It's, either in the back end framework of a site, or the audience itself, or the big platforms, right? Like, what did Google do this week that might change how your users are engaging with your content or finding your content. Was there an update on iOS that changed it? So it is part of what makes it exciting, right? And a little scary every time. I would imagine as a publisher, you're taking a risk, and you're not just hoping for the best, right? You guys are very thoughtful and have done the homework to say, okay, this does fit our audience. This is something that I think will make sense, and and then you kind of go from there. I'd love to kind of switch topics a little bit to something we call overheard from publishers. You get the honor of kind of speaking on behalf of the publisher from the publisher perspective. I would love to dig in a little bit about how, at your current role or your previous roles, how do you balance user experience and revenue? I feel like it's one of the biggest topics that I talk about with publishers all the time. This internal pull between, of course, there's the revenue team that is charged with keeping the ship afloat, and then there's the audience development team saying, if you lose all of our users, it doesn't matter, how many ads you sell, because there's no one that's going to see them. So I would love to hear from your perspective, how you approach that, how you approach it differently, if at all, or if you've kind of had one point of view that's worked regardless of where you are.
Hmm. Yeah, so I'm always wearing usually a revenue hat, right? Like my goals are to keep, monetizing our content so that it can be readily and freely available for the general public, whether that was Tribune's journalism, Britannica's article content, Merriam-Webster's, ability to look up a word and understand the etymology of a word, or at WeatherBug to get your important weather information. I think I've happily worked at these different publishers where I actually really believe in the mission. I really believe in our content. I'm really proud of the content that was generated at each of those different publishers, and I I believe that that content should be available to everyone equitably.
Yeah.
I don't want to paywall things. I don't want to gate stuff. I don't want to put things behind a subscription wall. I want that content to be available to the masses. To do that, we need to monetize it.
Yeah.
So it is that balance, right? I don't want to also interrupt, the user's experience going through that content to the extent that I don't have to, right? So
Right. Sure.
I think it's important to me that it be available, and I understand the mechanics and economics of that means we have to monetize it. So it's a
Yep.
balance. I think the other thing that I always try and remember is I'm a user of this content too.
Sure.
I know what a bad user experience is. I want to read the article about, Abraham Lincoln on Britannica, and I want to get, my answers where I want them. So I think when you approach it as, WeatherBug's obviously my weather app. Like I'm a user of the weather app. And so I think then it becomes a little easier to think about the user experience because it's for you too. And
Right.
so, it's definitely a balance. And at WeatherBug, like I said, I've been there a little over a year. They have taken it very seriously. That user experience is paramount. We don't even run interstitials in the app because at one point I think they tried it and
Mm.
users didn't like it. They said, "Okay, we listen to users. We actually take user feedback very seriously. We have a monthly kind of all hands call is what we
Mm.
call it,
Yeah.
the town hall call, and user voice is one of the agenda items every single time. Like, let's see what users are saying. Let's read the reviews. Let's share, what kind of feedback we're getting. Let's develop a product enhancement to address that feedback. We really care a lot about our users, and if that means that I have to get a little more creative with maybe a more basic ad map and how we're going to evaluate changes to that, that's okay. Like I think it's more important that users love coming to our app and use it, especially when you think about it being like a utility app, right?
Yeah.
We're not the only weather app out there,
What?
but we want our users to come, to ours. And so it is a balance. I think it doesn't mean we don't evaluate, potentially innovative products, and see like, do we think that would play nice with our audience, with our content, with our app framework, that kind of thing, because we certainly do. But yeah, I think we're careful about it at WeatherBug. I think it's hard if you alienate a user to get them back, and that's like a human thing. That's a human nature thing, and some people hold grudges longer than others. So we don't ever want to get to that point. We don't want to push people away.
When I think particularly in an in-app environment, right? I'll forget, oh, I went to a site and I had a bad experience. If someone shares a link of an article and then I quickly read the link, then I'm back on the site, right? It's a much easier way to bring people back. I think it's much more forgiving. Where in the app environment, if it's like, oh, delete app, right? It's not because someone's going to send me an article that, and I'm going, yeah, I might check on the web, but to go through the process of reinstalling an app is very different, right? So I think you get both you get the benefit of there's a lot of apps on there, and you don't, unless there's an offense, right? I tend not to remove apps. So you've got this great built-in loyalty because it becomes a habit. It's just one of the, it's one of the apps that I go to when I'm, in my user flow or in my
Hmm.
daily, my daily life.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
do you find that you get more feedback? I would think from app users than display users. I mean, because I put on the same hat you do, which is I'm also a consumer of the content that I'm helping, create or monetize or be involved in. But never, I don't want to say never, but, but maybe have never written comments about ad experiences, right? Because I'm in it. But on apps, I think it is something that I am more willing to give feedback. I like it, or, right. Have you found the same?
So I think it can depend what uh, path you give your audience to speak to you, to speak back to you as a publisher, right? So in the app world, you're right. You're often prompted, do you want a review? Do you
Yeah.
love the WeatherBug app? Give us 5 stars, write some comments.
Yeah.
So that prompt can help solicit responses.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, I have to say, though, it was interesting at Merriam-Webster and Britannica, there was kind of a very easy link you could click on the website to provide, feedback or send in comments, that kind of thing. And they would actually come to me, they would come to my inbox.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so that's great. I could actually see what might have been upsetting our users or what they loved and that kind of thing. And I know that it certainly at both of those companies, we had good social media teams as well who were looking for the comments people might make on Facebook or Twitter or X or in those different places too to highlight that as well. LinkedIn. It's
Yeah.
funny. The, a mutual friend of ours in the industry, made a post the other week, and they're in this world, right? And so they understand advertising, they understand that balance with UX, and the app that they were using was frustrating them. It was pushing them information they didn't care about, that they didn't want. They felt like the ad experience was over the top, etc. Well, they posted that on LinkedIn. And then, we're like, I'm deleting this app and I'm going to download a different one just
Yeah.
because of this, that kind of thing. So when that's out there, you should everyone
Yeah.
should listen. Publishers should listen. It's a little bit of a wake up call. And they were going to download WeatherBug instead. And so I, kind of took a screenshot and, shared it with our internal Slack channels like, user experience is real, everybody. got a new app user now.
Yes. It's really interesting when it is that, first connection, right? That this is really something that you're hearing it firsthand from the users, and then you're able to actually make a change within that organization. So the next thing I would love to talk about is if you've had an experience moving from sort of a big ad tech team to a smaller one, what would a checklist that you might give them be when they're building their programmatic team for the first time? Because I know you've managed a lot of teams and you've worked in all sorts of businesses, big and small. What advice might you have for them?
Sure. That was one of the biggest changes going from Tribune supporting all of direct sales to Britannica and just supporting programmatic, um, because the sheer volume of bodies that you need to do those two different things is very different. At Tribune, I had when I left at that time, there were 60 plus people that rolled up to me in some fashion, right? Not 60 direct reports, but
Sure, that's
we had tiers of leadership and a good force of people to support all of those sellers and creative services and planners and that kind of thing. And then at Britannica for programmatic, I had two.
too.
So it is very different, right?
Yeah,
And part of that meant that I was definitely going to be more of a doer as well. I was going to be potentially trafficking a line for a programmatic, partner. I was going to be back in the ad server, really in the weeds, and that was obviously fine with me, but that was a change. And so I think when you're building a programmatic team, you have to make sure that people know your hands on the keyboard, or however they say that phrase. Like, you got to get in there and whatever it takes, like, we just got to get it done. And I think other like traits or expectations to set when you're kind of building up that programmatic team, or whether you're looking to like pull someone onto the team or hire into the team, some of those things that are important are a bit of that attention to detail, but also they have to be like kind of into problem solving, like into being curious about, I wonder why that's happening. I wonder if I could figure out what might be causing this, or let me troubleshoot that. You have to go into it with a mindset of nothing's going to work perfectly,
right.
maybe ever, but also not all the time for sure. And
Right.
that you have to be okay with that. That's like, okay, that's cool. Here's the latest challenge. Let's figure out what we can do about it. Just kind of that mentality, I think, is huge. Um, Someone who just wants to set it and forget it and just like it works is
Right.
probably
They're
going
not.
to be disappointed a lot of the time in
Yeah.
programmatic. But yeah, so a little bit of that resiliency, like we can do it. Like here's the next curveball we've been thrown. We can figure it out. And then obviously some of there's just so much more. I feel like reporting and analytics and trying to like gather insights from data that happens in programmatic. So that's kind of maybe also that, but really, I think you have to come at it with a mindset of just curiosity and like let's figure it out. I don't know what the let's figure it out personality trait is.
Right. Do you have any sort of pro networking tips for a fellow publisher?
Oh, sometimes people hear the word networking and they have like an ick reaction, right? It sounds maybe manipulative or it sounds self serving or something like that. What I would say is put that out of your mind. Like, think of networking as like just that human interaction.
Yeah.
Take an interest in people, whether you're at a conference, whether you're at an industry thing, whether you're at, a partner happy hour, whatever it is, just take an interest in people, help them out when you can, and, you'll start to just develop these, natural relationships that are very organic. They're not,
Mhm.
any kind of false. I just feel like sometimes networking gets like a false
Yeah.
reputation,
Sure.
and really, it's not. People like to help other people. They like to interact with people. They like to learn more about people. Just if you take that approach, I feel like you'll just naturally start to develop these relationships that when, yes, lo and behold, a question has come up in my mind, and I think one of these nice,
Mhm.
lovely network industry colleagues that I have can help me. I feel no compunction about asking. So
Yeah.
I think take advantage of those opportunities, right? But also like you have to put a little into it. You have to try and like take an opportunity to stay in touch. Maybe it's go to a local happy hour. We have a Chicago industry happy hour that, Sarah Wagner and Connie Walsh and I kind of set up in Chicago once a month.
Yeah.
Show up, talk to people,
Yeah.
share a job posting you see on LinkedIn with someone who you think would like it.
Yeah.
Comment on someone's LinkedIn post. Like I said, answer a question in the Slack channel if you know the answer, that kind of thing. I think you put a little effort out there, and it doesn't take a lot. We're all humans. We all like to interact with people. So yeah, I think that's just kind of important.
Well, and I think that's great advice. And I think people are often too cynical about it, right? Networking doesn't always have to have an ROI, right? It's not, I'm going to go to this event, so I meet four people that are going to then do X, Y, and Z, right? It could just be, I'm going to go and maybe hear what I should be watching on Netflix that is not in my current queue, right? And it could just be that. And it could, who knows what that will materialize into later, but if you go in less cynically, I think, to your point, and really open yourself up, it'll be fun, it'll be, and it's part of how you build real relationships versus, have one-off conversations. We've talked a lot about how we engage with our community. How does WeatherBug stay on top of their community and really engage with them and pull them in?
Yeah. So our tagline at WeatherBug, and I don't know if tagline is the right marketing vocabulary word to use, but is know before. We want you to know what the weather is going to bring you before you're in it, right? So know before. And, we're a weather app. We want you to know what to expect when you go into the wild, leave your home. And so, yeah, we utilize push notifications to kind of help communicate that relevant and important information to our app users. There are certain communities that we're really necessary information for, right? My daughter's a lifeguard at the local pool here. Lifeguarding communities, they need to know if lightning's coming. The camping community, or RV users, they're out in the elements. They need to know, is that storm going to hit them? Is it heading their way? or even, outdoor sports, right? So you've got your kids' youth soccer team or their little league game, and it's from personal experience, good to know what what elements you're going to be doing and experiencing when you're there. So WeatherBug has a feature. It's our spark alert or spark lightning alert. When to keep you safe with lightning in the area. We would like never put that behind a paid subscription. We want
Sure.
that available. We want our users to be safe and to know what's coming. We take it real seriously. We just rolled out. Apparently, again, I've only been here a little over a year, but apparently we had a very popular alert sound. They actually patented it. It's a chirp, and it was, if a severe weather alert was happening and we were pushing out an alert, it would actually make the chirp sound instead of kind of getting lost in the
Right.
noise of all your other noises that
Yeah.
your phone is making and all the other alert sounds. So we just kind of relaunched that, and people, it's a little bit of an element of nostalgia with our core user base, and so they were very excited about that. But we just people rely on us for
Yeah.
important weather information. It was really funny. I had just gotten to WeatherBug. Most of my friends didn't even know I'd changed jobs. You know how it is.
Yeah.
And I we went took our RV, newly purchased, to a campground to meet up with our friends who were there, and they have a permanent spot at that campground. So they had gotten there a couple days earlier, and they were burning some leaves and some sticks in their fire pit, and apparently they were getting a lot of stink eye, and they couldn't really figure out why. And then someone finally stopped and was like, it is a high fire hazard time right now. Why are you burning anything? And they were like, oh my gosh, we didn't know. And this couple said, didn't you look at the WeatherBug app?
No, that's amazing.
And so then I show up, with my husband, we're going to camp with them.
Right.
And they're like, where did you say your new job is? I'm like,
Right.
WeatherBug. She goes, I guess I
That's
got to download the app right now. I'm like, you sure do. So it was just kind of funny, but it's important, right? Like knowing what those risks are and knowing whether you're going to be, in an environment that you need to be more cautious or careful. Like that's the information we want to put out there, and we want our communities to benefit from.
Well, and I think you have such a unique position where you are an app that sure there's going to be some entertaining content in there, but it is informational, right? It is critical information that can be life saving, and has a real direct physical impact, right? So it's not something that, oh, you can check it later. What is happening? What is important? So
Yeah.
that's fantastic. Before we close, I want to end with three pieces of advice you would have for fellow publishers. Looking at the rest of 2024, are there any things in particular that you feel like you need to be doing A, B, and C?
Okay, no pressure.
I know.
We talked about the community. Embrace your network
Yeah.
and contribute to it. Don't we're not just takers. Like contribute, give and take, etc. Because we are in this together, and let's help each other find solutions. As with whatever the rest of the year and next will bring. The second thing I would say is lend a hand to those looking for jobs right now, whatever that is. If it's encouragement, if it's an offer to assist, if it's a connection that you can make or an introduction. The layoffs in digital have been rough. Like, be helpful in that way and empathetic. And I assure you, any little thing that you're able to do, it might seem little to you, but it's not going to feel little to the person who's in that position and really searching for that next role. So that's the second thing I would recommend. And that is also not time sensitive. Do that all the time. And
Right.
the last thing, I have to say, download the WeatherBug app for iOS or Android and know before you go outside what you're going to be getting into.
I love that. Amazing. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, everyone who tuned in to listen and to our conversation today. And Catherine, thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights with us. Everything from monetization to community building to networking. We hope that we left you with a couple strategies for becoming a more informed member of our community. Um, Thanks so much. Don't forget also to check out Catherine's LinkedIn for her candid takes on all things happening in the publishing world and what she's up to.